Jenny, and thank you everyone for joining this session entitled Strategic Thinking, using SWOT analysis for personal growth and business growth as well. I want to remind everyone, if you could, to please complete the demographic poll that should be showing up on your screen. It's going to turn off shortly, so if you could, we use demographics for our reporting because we are a federally funded. And keep that piece of paper handy that Karen had you get out, or if you don't have a piece of paper and a pencil close by, go ahead and grab one, because we're going to, Stephanie's going to be asking you to participate in an activity as we go along here. So you do need a piece of paper and a pen. Other housekeeping is we ask you to mute your microphones and then use the chat button to ask your questions. And some of you have been putting stuff on the chat, so thank you for that. We will address your chat questions and comments as we go along, and for sure we'll get caught up on all of them at the end. Okay, so our presenter today is Stephanie Plaster. She is the Extension Regional Farm Management Educator. She will walk us through how to assess yourself and your business for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and use them to develop strategies to achieve your goals and improve decision-making. So welcome, Stephanie.
Thanks, Sandy. Before we get started, I just want everyone to get a little familiar with your Zoom screen, because I am going to be asking you to participate a little bit if you can. If you don't want to, that's totally fine too. But on the bottom or top of your screen, you're going to see the chat feature. So you can click on that and then you'll be able to write in questions, or if I ask questions, you'll be able to answer them through the chat feature. And then also take a look at that reactions feature. You can submit reactions there. I will ask you to do a little bit of a reacting in a second here. So take a look at that reactions feature in the chat feature. And as Sandy mentioned, I am Steph Plaster. I'm the Regional Farm Management Educator. I serve Ozaukee, Washington, Sheboygan, and Fond du Lac counties. This is a relatively new position. I started within the Regional Farm Management position January 1st, but I have been part of Extension since 2013, so I've been around a little bit. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about strategic thinking for the farm business, what it is and why we do it, and then using a SWOT analysis for personal and business growth. So these are some leadership tools that we're going to focus on that you can use at work. We can use them in our businesses with our families, and we can use them individually as well. So again, throughout the presentation, I'm going to be asking you to spend just a minute or so every once in a while filling out this practice SWOT analysis. So that's why we asked you to have a piece of paper and a pencil ready to go. Again, you don't have to do this, but I do think it's really valuable. So it's going to help build some muscle memory if you participate in this. So you become a little bit familiar and comfortable with doing the process. So then when you want to do it for whether it be individual growth for your family or for your business, that you have that muscle memory, you have that practice built in, it becomes easier every time you do it. Okay, so I absolutely love this. Leadership is about rallying people to a better future. If your farm is at a crossroads, your leadership skills will define whether you can envision that better future and rally enough people and resources to make it happen. So again, we're talking about some leadership skills today. These are great in personal and in business life, and it really helps you kind of pull everyone together, motivate folks. You're making some decisions, you're making some big changes, and it gives you those confidence to do that, to move forward and to be successful. So what I really want you to be able to take back to the farm or take back to your house or to your family is, what is strategic thinking? Why is it useful to practice? What is the strategic planning process and how do you use it? And then what is a SWOT analysis and why you should perform one regularly? Okay, so here is the first opportunity to submit answers or submit some responses via chat. So what is strategic thinking? Have you heard of it before? What does it mean to you? If you're able to, please pop just the first thing that pops into your head on strategic thinking, just pop that into the chat there if you can. And I'll give about a minute for a response. Ooh, self-analysis. Absolutely, that's great. Beginning with the end in mind, absolutely. Thinking with a plan or method of analyzing yourself, and planned improvement. Ooh, I love that one as well. Thank you for responding. These are some great responses. So I like to think about strategic thinking. It just reminds me of chess. So what you're doing is you're thinking ahead, you're kind of anticipating what your competition's going to do. You're taking maybe some risks in order to succeed, and you're thinking big, you're thinking deeply, and you're thinking across time. So it's really being intuitive. And now a lot of folks don't think about this, but it's a visual and a creative process. So strategic thinking isn't just, or, when you hear strategic planning, you might think, okay, well, I'm just going to put some pen to paper, or I'm going to type up some notes, or I'm going to submit this to someone. But really this process it's that feeling what your intuition is telling you. It's being visual, it's being creative, thinking outside the box, using your critical thinking to solve complex problems, diving into emerging issues or emerging themes, issues, some patterns that you're noticing, and maybe some opportunities. It's considering all possible scenarios, not excluding any scenarios at first, and then maybe anticipating possible outcomes for any actions you might take or any inactions. So really making sure not to exclude anything when you start the strategic thinking process, and think about what your actions or what your inactions might cause to happen. So when we think about this strategic thinking or planning process, I really love this example here, which came out of the Western Integrated Ranch Education Program. It's divided into 3 sections: the strategic or the long-term section, the tactical or the medium term, and the operational or short term. So in that strategic phase, we're really thinking about where are we right now and where do we want to go. That tactical or that medium term phase is how are we going to get there? What are we going to do to make these things happen? And that operational or that short term is let's do it. Let's put these plans to actions and let's see if they're working. So I love thinking about strategic thinking and planning in these 3 different phases: the strategic, tactical, and operational. Where are we? Where do we want to go? How are we going to get there? And let's do this. Let's actually put these things into action. So then what is that strategic planning? That piece is that long-term planning, big picture thinking. It's being proactive, and it's envisioning your future, your business's future, establishing your goals to get you to actually live out that future and how you're going to achieve those goals. And in this phase, it's really, really important to lean into others' perspectives. So include other viewpoints outside just your own. So it's a really, really key piece to think about. And I always like to refer back to my dad, who told me this one time. And whenever I'm in kind of like I have a tough decision to make or a complicated conflict with someone, he always tells me that make sure you're not only seeing your perspective, the other party's perspective, but make sure to take a step outside of that and look at that third perspective, that holistic image of what's going on. And that's really what strategic planning is. It's taking 1 or 2 steps back and looking at that big picture. So before a business can be effective, strategy must be created, converted into policy, communicated, and made to work. So that's a really good quote that I want folks to focus on here. Before a business can be effective, strategy must be created, converted into policy. So you actually have to put it down, put it into words, tease it out how you want that to look, then communicate it out. And then you have to actually do it, make it work, put it into action. So these steps of the strategic planning process, and these aren't written in stone. This is just to give you a good idea of kind of how you can work your way through this strategic thinking. So number 1, establish your values and purpose. So this is what is important to you, what is important to your business, whether that be Sustainability is a really important thing to you, whether that be environmental or economic sustainability. Maybe your family is really important. Perhaps your faith is really important. What is it that motivates you to do what you're doing? So establish your values and purpose. And then craft your mission and vision statements. So that vision statement is what your business or self will look like in the future. Your mission statement explains why your business exists and what it will achieve. And then you move on to that next step, that set strategic goals. So those goals should be in support of your mission statement. And then number 4, you're going to go down into inventorying resources or kind of assessing what your current situation is. Then moving into exploring possible enterprises or new opportunities, figuring out that plan and then implementing that plan, and then coming back to monitoring and adjusting. So that would be our more, that shorter term operational piece, and then replanning. It is totally okay as we go through this process to adjust as needed. And then as a reminder, goals are of little value if there's no plan for achievement and no implementation with ongoing monitoring and adjustment opportunities. So I think a lot of times goals don't get achieved because they're no longer useful and we haven't gone back and said, okay, what's going wrong? Why isn't this working? Can we adjust this a little bit? Or maybe we need to set that goal aside and create a new one and move forward with that. Before I move forward here, let me just go back and say, today we're going to be talking about that SWOT analysis that I mentioned. That's going to be in that 3 transitioning to 4. We're going to set some strategic goals and we're going to figure out how we're going to do that. And then we're going to kind of assess our current situation and inventory our resources a little bit. So that's where that SWOT analysis falls in this strategic planning steps. So what we're doing is we're creating some strategies, and these determine emerging themes, issues, patterns, and opportunities. Like we've mentioned, it creates practical actions that communicate how a business plans to reach its goals. So we're looking at the how. Again, we're being proactive, and this allows us to maintain more control over what happens to our farms in our future. So we want to make sure that we're nimble, we're adaptable, and we want to make sure we're not afraid to acknowledge and include fear throughout this process. So we want to make sure we want to think about any risks or tough decisions that need to be made and not ignore them. So the meat of what we're talking about today, the SWOT analysis. If you could look at your reactions that Zoom allows you to do and raise your hand if you've heard of a SWOT analysis before, or if you have done one. If you're able to do that, if you're not able to do that, throw that in the chat there. Okay, I see some hands being raised. Great. Wonderful. Okay, some folks. So we've got 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, great. So a SWOT analysis is an acronym. So we'll get into that in a second here. But what I like about this quote that I have, strategy without process is little more than a wish list, is I want us to keep this in mind because there's really 2 pieces to this SWOT, or to even thinking about strategies in general. There's the process piece, and then there's the like writing it down, creating the list piece. And we want to make sure we have a good balance between the list or what's written and the process. So we want to make sure we're not stifling the process by keeping strictly to the list. And we want to make sure we're not forgetting about what we're learning and gaining throughout actually creating this list and process. So don't stifle one for the other. So a SWOT analysis, it's the identification of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to your business, or if you're doing one for your individual or your family. It's the development of strategies and goals from this analysis. And then the most important part is the creation of realistic actions to reach those goals. So a lot of times we'll see a SWOT done and we'll just do the SWOT part, the identification, but it's really developing those into goals and then putting them into action where the value is found throughout this process. So the purpose, again, is to build in the ability to adapt nimbly in a changing environment and make proactive business decisions. So it's very, very adaptable. It's useful in multiple settings and phases. It does not have to be done in one sitting, but it could be done in as little as, if you're going to do a decent, probably a 60-minute session. If you're focused, it's something you could work on over a period of time. And we'll go a little bit why you might want to come back and revisit the SWOT. But it's really adaptable process and it's specific to you. So you get out of it what you put into it. Before we go in deeply into the SWOT, thinking about this process, so you're identifying your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and you're kind of creating these goals and strategies and making an action plan. Who do you think should be involved in this process? Plop that into the chat there. Who should be involved in the creation or the running of a SWOT analysis? Okay, so we have the people that will be affected or working together. Yep. Anybody have others' ideas of who should be involved or who shouldn't be involved? We have family, financial advisors, employees. What else? Who else might want to be involved? Those involved in planning and those who need to execute actions to successfully achieve their goals. Everyone who has a stake in the operation, owners, employees, etc. And give it just a couple more seconds here while I refuel. Stakeholders. Okay. So this is a little bit of a trick question, and I love it because who should be involved is one, it's dependent on what issue you're trying to address. So a SWOT should be very issues or operations focused. You want to focus on maybe one thing. Is it you want to look at the business and you have an opportunity you want to take advantage of? Is something not working? If you're doing it personally, are you looking at a career change? Is that the SWOT? Is that the kind of issue that you're addressing? So you should have some kind of issue you're addressing. But you want to make sure at that table you have folks, if you're for your business, you have folks that are involved in that higher level leadership or your team, your management team. So any business partners, folks that are making the big decisions, folks that you want to buy into the process and the direction of the farm. Those are the folks that should be at the table for actually creating this SWOT analysis. But there's also two pieces to this. So we want the business partners, the management team involved in creating this SWOT, but we also want to be gathering feedback from folks that might not be sitting there during the SWOT process. And so we want to be gathering feedback from employees. We want to be gathering feedback from maybe consultants we work with or our lenders, grabbing feedback from our customers, from family and friends that are outside of the process, because we want to be pulling in perspectives from all over the place. So these folks can all have touches into this SWOT process. But when you're sitting down to do a SWOT, if you're with your business or with your family, it's helpful to have one person in a leadership position, whether that's you, that you're going to lead the SWOT, or if you'd like to maybe start on neutral ground, you can always bring someone else in to help kind of facilitate that conversation, whether that's a trusted advisor, a trusted consultant, if you're comfortable with your extension educator, or an outside family or friend that could not give input, but just lead you through the process. That might be helpful too, to make sure everyone's kind of on level ground with each other. So there's lots of different people that could be involved in this SWOT process. Moving forward, here we go. Okay, so I'd like everyone to take out that piece of paper that we mentioned earlier and that pen or pencil that you'd like to use. And you're going to divide your paper into 4 sections like you see here on your screen and label each section strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. You don't have to fill anything out yet. Just go ahead and label your paper. So I mentioned I'll be asking you to spend a minute or so every once in a while filling out this practice SWOT, and I'll let you know which sections we're going to be filling in as we go. So this is to help build, again, that muscle memory to become familiar with the process. So that basic law of behavioral psychology, it states that the more frequently you're exposed to something that makes you uncomfortable or that you're not used to, the easier it becomes. So this is why we're practicing. We are going to do a practice SWOT. You're welcome to kind of think up an issue right now, whether it be a family, again, an individual, maybe you're thinking of a career change, or a business. Is there an opportunity you're thinking about exploring? Does a change need to be made? And we're not going to go deeply into the SWOT, but I want folks to practice as we go through the individual sections. Just practice filling this out so we become more familiar, we get that memory of the process, and it becomes something that's easier and easier as we go through. So step one of the SWOT is to really look at the strengths and weaknesses. And so these are referring to internal analysis. That's analysis of you or your business. Internal strengths and weaknesses. This is the self-assessment piece. This is looking deeply at yourself, your business performance, your assets or the resources that you have available, and really importantly, look at your management as well. This kind of can get overlooked. Look at the management. You have your management over your business or your managers within your business. Look at maybe some employee relations pieces go in here. Communication is a big one. Are there communication breakdowns, or are you really great at communication? Think about what's your competitive advantage. What do you or does your business do better than anyone else around you? What do you excel at? What's your specialty? What are you beating the market at? And then what limits what you can do? What's one of those, we call it a weakness, but what's really a limiting factor on how you operate? Is it, things I'll just throw out there, your finances, there's lots of things, you're resource limited, you're land limited, you don't have leadership skills, or your manager doesn't have, he's not a people person, he's a cow guy. What limits what you have the ability to do? And then look at or think about, how has the business performed in the past, or how have you performed in the past during the good times and the bad? So you might find strengths and weaknesses kind of flow through each. But when you're filling out a SWOT, you want to be really specific and very targeted. So use specific examples when you're pulling out what your strengths and your weaknesses are. Maybe also consider what trips you up. What is something that is always, it always seems to be holding you back, or something that always seems to get in your way. Record that as a weakness. And most importantly, be very realistic and honest with yourself. You have to be a little bit hard here, because if you aren't, then the process isn't going to work quite right. So the process, again, is really important, because you want to make sure you're thinking deeply, writing, sometimes just write the first thing that comes to your mind and then think about it, and you can come back to it too. But really think deeply and hard about these things and be very realistic. So I'm going to give you a minute or two within yourself to write down on that piece of paper, fill out your strengths and your weaknesses. You might want to jot at the top of the paper what your kind of focus or your issue is. Maybe it's career change, or exploring a new enterprise, or something's not working on the farm, or we're not making any money. Really think about what your internal strengths and weaknesses are related to that issue. So again, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to just fill that out for yourself. And you don't have to use this at the end of it, but it really helps to just get that brain going. We're doing some brainstorming right now. Don't exclude anything. It pops to your mind, write it down. This is not where we're winnowing things and kind of crossing things out. Anything that pops to your mind, anything you think about, write it down. Brainstorming, 2 minutes, go. Okay, so that was about 2 minutes. So now that we have those strengths and those weaknesses kind of jotted down really briefly, just a trial run here, let's talk a little bit about how you can dive deeper into creating those strengths and weaknesses. So another thing, after you come together, and whether it's you and your business partners or whoever doing this initial strengths and weaknesses flesh out. And I will say, as a pause here, if you're doing this in like a team setting, if you're doing it with your management team on the farm, it does help to not just have it on a piece of paper, but if you get those big poster board papers, or if you have a chalkboard or a whiteboard, it helps to write those out and just really spend time filling them out and recording it, and then moving on to the next section. You can always come back and add, and then you can have one person that pulls all the notes together to create your strengths list and your weaknesses list. But again, make sure this is a visual, this is a creative process. If it helps you to draw pictures to explain. You don't just have to do bullet points or written out words. You use whatever you need to really tease out those strengths and weaknesses. So you want to also reach out to people within and outside the farm, like I mentioned. You may, and this is a casual conversation. This is, you don't need to interrogate your employees like, what stinks on this farm? But just ask them, what do you really think our strengths are? What is our farm really good at? Or what could we use help with? Ask your customers that, ask the co-ops, ask folks that, your consultants that you're using, or any of the reps that you work with. They might be able to give you that outside perspective and their perception of events that are going on in the farm. That might not be your perception, but you're going to gain something there from that knowledge exchange. You're really going to gain a lot of insight on what other folks feel about your farm that maybe you're too close to the situation to realize, or you're like, whoa, that's not us at all. Maybe we need to reframe or shape how we're communicating that, or how we're presenting this idea a little bit differently. So some other ideas to dive a little bit deeper into creating these strengths and weaknesses: compile some industry benchmarks. Look at what other farms are doing or businesses are doing. Rank these in terms of their level of importance to your operations competitive advantage. If you need some help looking at doing like a market analysis, there are resources out there that can help you do that. There's benchmarks available. We work with some of those within the university system. Your accountants or your advisors may have access to those as well. And then you can also look at those financial analysis measures. Look over the last 3 to 5 years. You want to make sure you're getting a nice, big, expansive look. Don't just look at the last year, because as we know, we've had the pandemic. Things have been a little bit crazy and different over the last 2 years. We want to look at what's happened in those years. Look deeper than that. Look beyond that as well. Again, the ups and the downs, sometimes the things that have gone right, what's gone wrong, how we're making decisions is really important too. The big decisions that have been made on the farm, look at how those decisions were made and kind of the impacts of those decisions later. Did that turn out well? Did it not turn out well? What do you wish could have been done differently? You might be able to tease out strengths and weaknesses from those. And then again, look at how that farm is being managed. Look at your employee turnover. Look at what really could have saved you, where you think you could have picked up efficiencies, or where you have picked up efficiencies, and what led you to those decisions. Those can all help you dive into identifying very specifically what your strengths and weaknesses are. So that next step, that step 2 of this, creating the SWOT grid, is looking at or recognizing external opportunities and threats. So these are things outside of the farm's control. So external analysis here. What is the general condition of the economy, and how is this affecting your business? Look at input and commodity prices. What are the trends in those 2 areas? Are there changes that you're noticing? And then what are some upcoming or current federal and state rules and regulations? Are these good for your business? Are they worrying? Are you unsure where they're headed? What are the industry trends and changes that are coming about? What are others? What are your neighbors? What are others in the state or maybe across the country that you're noticing? What are they doing or saying? What's the buzz around the area? And then what do consumers want? Even if we find them to be real frustrating, what are the consumers saying? And maybe what are the consumers saying over different generations or different age groups? Where's those opportunities in there? Or what are threats to your business? And then what is your competition doing? Look for farms or look for businesses that are very similar to you in your operating, but you might want to look at some that are either what you consider a little ahead of you or a little behind you. What's your competition doing? Do you see opportunities and threats from them? So now again, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to just fill out based on that issue that you're working through on your own, fill out those opportunities and those threats. And this is externally from the farm. The SWOT, the strengths and weaknesses were internal. Now you're looking externally. What outside of your farm might be affecting opportunities and threats available? And just put those prompt questions up again if you forgot, for opportunities and threats. Okay, to keep us moving, that's been about 2 minutes. We're going to go on to the next stage here. And what is that next stage? So we have our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We've filled out, we've done that identification. So now we're moving into the strategy and goal setting piece. So once again, don't forget to seek input from other sources. Once we've gone through this identification piece, you want to ask those business partners, employees, customers, consultants, anyone you're doing business with, family, friends, their thoughts and perceptions. Remember, this is an information gathering stage only. Don't exclude options at this point. It's also the time to do a bit of research or information for those external factors. If you haven't been keeping up to date with what's going on technology-wise, news-wise, industry-wise, this is the time to gather that information. And then once all that information has been pulled together and recorded, that next step is to recognize and create available strategies that you could try. So this creating strategies piece, what you're doing is you're looking at taking advantage of those strengths that you've listed, minimizing or eliminating those impact of the weaknesses that you have, and looking at maximizing your farm's potential or your potential and mitigating that risk that is shown out through those weaknesses and threats. So we're going to identify cross strategies, and this will make a little bit more sense in a second. So we're looking for strategies that you can identify that show up more than once so that we can prioritize them. And if this is really hard to visualize, it was really hard for me to visualize too, until I was shown a little bit of how to create a SWOT matrix. And so I'm going to show you next a worksheet that we have developed. It's not quite ready for release yet. I think we'll be releasing it sometime in February or March, but this is what you can use, the format you can use to help you identify these strategies. So you've got your strengths and weaknesses in that internal analysis on the top of the screen. And then on that left side there, we have our external analysis with our opportunities and threats. And so the next step that we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at creating strategies based on this idea of strengths, using our strengths and opportunities together to create strategies, maybe pairing our weaknesses and our opportunities to create strategies, pairing those strengths and threats. Are there opportunities or strategies we can pull from there? And then using our weaknesses and our threats also to create strategies. So if this doesn't make any sense, hold on, because I've got some prompt questions for you. So these SO strategies, these strengths and opportunities, are there strengths you can use to take advantage of opportunities? Can you pair those together? And this is where it helps to have gone through and numbered your strengths like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and gone through and done that for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And then it helps to kind of pair those like S1 with O1 or S1 with O4. Are there strengths you can use to take advantage of opportunities? And I'll give you some examples here in a second. For weaknesses and opportunities, can weaknesses be overcome by taking advantage of those opportunities? Can strengths help you avoid or mitigate threats? And what can be done to minimize weaknesses and avoid threats? So I'm just going to give you probably a minute here to see if you can create any of those on your own before I go into some examples. See if you can just take a look and see if you can pair some up to create some opportunities or some strategies for yourself. Okay, I know I didn't give you a lot of time to do that, but this is just a quick practice so that when you go home and you go back to the farm, or you're doing this maybe later tonight or in a couple weeks, you just have an idea. You've just thrown down some first instincts. So an example of an SO strategy, a strength and opportunity strategy. One of your strengths might be connecting with people and maintaining your business relationships. You have really good networks, really strong networks, good relationships. If you have conflict with people, you're still leaving in good standing. You tend not to burn bridges. And one of your opportunities is to provide a specialized or a popular product direct to consumers who have interest in knowing who their farms are. So this is really, especially if you're like a beef operation, or maybe if you're a small vegetable farm, this might be important to you. Or if you're a dairy and you have an opportunity to maybe do some value added to create cheese or ice cream or yogurt on the farm, you could pull a strategy that you expand into direct marketing your product through a website, a farmer's market, or a storefront, or you join a co-op or a group of other farmers wanting to do the same thing, because you have that. One of your strengths is maintaining those relationships and connections with people, which can be used to market. And then that opportunity that one of the products that you have the ability to create is really needed, and folks want to have that direct relationship with their farmer. So that's an SO example of an SO opportunity. So a weakness and an opportunity strategy, WO strategy, your farm has communication challenges and no one seems to be on the same page. So one of the weaknesses, bad communication. No one knows what's going on. There's like mass confusion. Folks aren't talking very well. But one of the opportunities the farm has to expand, whether that's the farm next door is selling their land, you have the opportunity to purchase it, or you know that you could expand the farm somehow, whether that's getting into a new enterprise or bringing on more cows. So there's that opportunity to expand. One strategy might be to implement mandatory team meetings with set agendas and action steps to increase those efficiencies and address problems before they become huge incidents and reduce those communication barriers so everybody knows what's going on. And it might also help, another strategy would be to create an organizational chart to show who is responsible for what and what the chain of command is. So if your farm has communication issues or no one's on the same page, no one's listening to each other, you might turn that into an opportunity and create that organizational chart or create a way that you can start communicating better. So if you're using your strengths and your threats to create a strategy, it might look something like this. Your farm has low employee turnover and employees generally really enjoy working for you. Folks want to work for you. They've heard good things. But one of the threats is it's an incredibly tight labor market right now, and there are many opportunities available and sometimes for higher prices. So one of the strategies that you might implement is to review current HR practices that you have, check in with your employees to see how things are going and troubleshoot issues, or you could implement changes or improvement, such as things that don't cost you a ton of money. Like if you can't afford to raise prices, maybe you could do spot bonuses. You could have some more flexible scheduling. Maybe you increase vacation time or you institute a reward system just to make sure that you're keeping those employees happy and you're not facing that threat of the incredibly tight labor market that we currently exist in. So the last, weaknesses and threat strategy, an example of that would be if you have a weakness where you produce and sell just one commodity. And this might be very common for us right now. You just have one commodity and the threat is incredibly fluctuating or low commodity prices. One strategy that you might be able to pull out is that you could diversify your income streams. This might be taking a look at, do you have any value you can add to a product? Is there an agritourism opportunity? Is there an investment opportunity that you could take an advantage of? Is there a new enterprise that you can spin off of? Do you have a byproduct that you can turn into a sellable product? So that's where you could do with your weaknesses and your threats. Pull those strategies out. So I know we went very briefly through that. That's where the rubber meets the road, is really pulling and teasing those strategies out of your SWOT analysis. And how do you turn these into action steps? So very briefly, you identify the top 3 strategies, look for ones that occur more often or that seem to be tied together or are more feasible, more doable, maybe have the biggest reward, less risk. Identify those top 3 strategies. Convert those strategies into goals. Those don't have to be those long-term goals. They could be smaller, either operational or tactical goals. List action steps needed to achieve those goals. So really write it down. If you like lists, this is a good one for you, but write your goal, action steps. It might be 1 to 3 action steps needed to achieve those goals. Identify the person responsible for each of those steps. Determine a realistic time frame for the goal to be completed. Oftentimes I'll see, it's very popular to see 30, 60, 90-day goals. You might have a quarterly goal, or this is to be done in 6 months, but write that time frame down. Determine that realistic time frame for the goal to be completed. Schedule a check-in. If you have a goal that's going to be, 3 to 6 months out, maybe you need to check in every month. Maybe you need to check in every week, and then adjust as needed. This is really important. When you're doing those check-ins, whether that be at a team meeting or just with yourself, make sure to give yourself a little bit of grace. And if it's not working out, check in or adjust as needed. You don't have to be locked into that goal. Things can change. Rigidity can really be a hindrance. You might also want to include how much each step or goal will cost if you're doing for budgeting purposes, and what your measurement of success will be. I know I will have achieved this goal when XYZ happens. So because we're running out of time here, and I want to make sure you have a little bit of a chance for questions, just going to remind folks, I hope you are a little bit more familiar with strategic thinking and why it's useful to practice, what that strategic planning process looks like and how you can use it, and then what a SWOT analysis is and how you should perform one regularly. If you have questions or you want more resources, our farm management website is farms.extension.wisc.edu. And let me get out of this here. We have more upcoming webinars where I'll be talking a little bit more about strategic thinking or some of those business development topics. We have more kind of economic outlook topics this January. All can be found on Farm Ready Research is our extension winter webinar series. So that's go.wisc.edu/farm ready research. If you'd like to pull my references, here you go. Otherwise, my contact information is on this page. Feel free to email me or call me with questions. And hopefully when we get that worksheet ready to release, it'll go on that farms.extension.wisc.edu. I do have an article about building strategies. So you can just type in the search bar strategies and it'll pop right up. Once that worksheet is ready, I'm going to pop it on that article for you. And then also I would much appreciate if you could fill out that evaluation poll that just popped up on the screen. Please fill that out, and please, if you have any comments, fill that in that fill in the blank one. Love to hear feedback from you. I hope this was very, very helpful. And if you have questions, I can take them now.
So Stephanie, one person, I'm sorry, I guess it was Amy who texted in and said she'd done a SWOT analysis.
Okay.
And I was wondering, how often should you do a SWOT analysis? Like every time the mood strikes you? 'Cause there's quite a bit to it, actually.
Yep. So I think a good rule of thumb is that you should probably be doing for your business, you should be doing a SWOT analysis about every 6 months, just to make sure you're keeping up to date. If the mood strikes you more often, you certainly could, or if a big issue crops up that you really want to, I like to call it like a really fancy pro-con list. If the mood strikes you, you could do it more often than that, but I would say a good rule of thumb is at least twice a year, making sure you're going through a SWOT and kind of keeping yourself in order, I'll say, making sure you're not letting things pass you by.
And Amy's putting down, we did our SWOT analysis for the FFA Alumni Council, and they revisit the results each year as new members come on board.
Oh, great.
Yeah, that's a really good idea, Amy. So,
it is a good idea. Thank you for sharing that. It's really important to communicate these things out because communication is never a bad thing. And it really helps to have everyone all on the same page and kind of moving in the same direction.
Especially for a lot of boards that we all are involved in, because
yes.
boards get stuck with the status quo of what's always been done.
Yep.
Steph, you had said that the people doing the SWOT analysis who are at the table are the higher level management, but you need to get some input back on what you came up with, like, and this is where my question is, are we sending a summary? What are we sharing with outside folks? What do we bring? Or do you just record everything you did and give them the whole packet? And I can't see how they would read all that. So
no, I think there's a couple of pieces here too. When you're asking folks for input, I think it's with the acknowledgement that they're not maybe going to see all of your internal, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threat. That's really for just the management team. But when you're sharing out the results, I think you can share out some of those strategic priorities that came out of that. We completed a SWOT analysis, and after that, we have decided, our 3 main areas of focus are going to be X, Y, Z, and you can list those strategies. Or we completed a SWOT analysis, and now we have these goals that we're working towards. So you can just provide that summary report. We really appreciate your input on this. We've kind of dived deep into it and taking others into consideration. Here's the strategies that we're focused on moving forward. Even because I think sometimes you can get into a situation where they've given you feedback in one area and that doesn't become a high priority focus. I just saw that I live in the city of Port Washington, and they're going through their strategic planning process, and that popped up on Facebook this morning.
do you have any tips about how to get people excited to do this? You call them to the table, you call the meeting, but how do you get them
Yeah.
to do the work?
I think one, make it a little bit fun. This is not, should be not nose to the grindstone. And fun's relative, right? But I think you want this to be a process. You want it, I go back to that intuitive, visual, creative. You want this to be a really engaging process. You're taking everyone's feedback. So anything they say is going to be written down. Their contribution is going to be noted, and this should not be painful. So that's where, if you have team meetings, schedule it. Maybe you're going to do a whole 60-minute session. You're going to take 1 hour and you're going to totally complete the SWOT. And you're going to ask people to really prepare in advance or just think about what they need to, what their farm strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are. Or you're going to say, okay, today we're going to take 15 minutes of our weekly or monthly meeting, and we're going to talk about our farm strengths. And then we're going to have one person in charge of pulling that together. And you can kind of chunk it out like that too. So I think making it small, making it chewable, making it very, very focused. I think that's important too. Focusing on an issue and being very specific and realistic. We don't want this to be a torturous process where we're meeting just to meet.
Well, thank you, Sandy, for moderating, and then especially to Steph for the presentation, and all of the techniques and strategies to achieve all those new goals that I know we all have for this new year. So thank you, Steph, for doing that. The resources and the video of this presentation will be on the Heart of the Farm website, probably within the next week, I would say. So be sure to go there. And then we'd like to thank you all for attending and hope that you will participate in our last one, which will be on February 3rd. And then just a reminder that Farm Ready Research webinar series that Steph mentioned a little bit earlier. Just there's going to be quite a few coming up. I believe that will run through May 10th. So there's quite a few of them on a lot of different farm management production topics. So again, thank you all for joining us today, and stay warm. Thanks. Bye-bye.